carry the weight with stories that matter. Don't let them wait. Every story matters, from bases to war zones, from tearful reunions to cold nights alone. Spouses and veterans, hearts that won't quit, telling the truth about all of it.
Hello and welcome back, everyone. It's just another day in the life as a military wife. And this week's episode, we have the opportunity to have an in-depth look with an infantryman named Brooks, who served in Afghanistan and worked closely not only with the Afghani people, but with the Afghani military and police, and what he learned from that experience. As always, I'm your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife. Okay, so this part of the conversation is going to come right in the middle of the full length interview that I did with Brooks. And in the first part, which is aired in an earlier episode, he talks about joining the military at 17 when he was still in high school and working with the Guard and all that sort of stuff, and his experience prior to deploying. In today's episode, we're going to focus more on his actual experience in Afghanistan, what he learned, and how it impacted him. So let's dive into that now. So you said partway through your deployment, you had a change in perspective.
Yeah. So I guess to really understand the change, it's both. I mean, it was absolutely a spiritual change for me, but it was also, I mean, it was very literal because, like I was saying before, I'm on the other side of the planet. That was one literal thing that I could see on a map and on, I understand we're not on a flat Earth. This is a globe. I'm on the other side of it. My home is all the way over there. But there was a lot of literal things that once my eyes were exposed, I became a lot less ignorant. I became a lot more open-minded. I became a lot more empathetic. Because you have to understand, let me rewind a little bit. As a 15-year-old, I'm one of those kids who who's a little belligerent with a good heart, right? I'm the one of those kids that let's just kill all the terrorists. Why not just wipe them out or whatever with I mean, no knowledge whatsoever. And when I got to Afghanistan, I had learned a little bit more, I guess, as far as the way, the things of the world and understanding governments and all that kind of stuff. I learned a lot more, but being there, having experiences with the locals, having, talking one on one with the Afghan National Army soldiers, talking one on one with contractors from all over the world who were there as an opportunity. There's so much that was eye opening, but there was a key moment right in the middle of deployment where um, I saw this little girl's hands and they were burned to a crisp. They were just And I learned from one of the locals that it's actually pretty common over there to punish the children by holding their hands to the fire. So they learn to not do something. And there was another little girl that there's so much to actually paint this picture accurately, but you have to understand that in Afghanistan you don't see women, period. You never see women. There's only men out and about. The women are tucked away in their homes, and if they do come out, they're it's not like your traditional Arab like covering. It is like full blown. You don't see an ounce of skin. There's a veil, layers of mesh over the eyes. You can't see anything human about them except for their shape, and they move very quickly. Like if you see a woman, it is very quickly and then they're gone like a mouse. It's just the only caveat to that is that there are to a certain age it's acceptable. So like a very little girl up to the age of let's just say like 6, it's just like a child in the Afghan culture that they don't really care. Just like in our culture, it's fine to see, little children naked in the bathtub, but as soon as you hit a certain age, like especially for a little girl, you got to make sure that they got a shirt on and everything. So it was similar in that aspect. Um, but it was these little girls specifically, my little experiences with them. Like one of them was this little girl, um, all these little kids, and you've probably heard this before, all these little kids, um, when it comes to a gift, you could give them, like you could give them a water bottle or some candy or something. But when you give them a pen or a pencil or a marker, it's like opening up a whole new world for them. And I remember I had given this little girl a blue pen that I had, and she just sat there and was so content to just color her whole hand blue, just every little bit of her hand. And it was just really, for me, it was a witness, like a spiritual thing where I realized that every child on this planet is innocent. And that might be something that a lot of people know, but for me, I had from a teenager point of view, I had kind of looked down on the religion of Islam because of the terrorism that can spawn from the extremists, and I had it really just uh, criminalized, the whole countries, And I left Afghanistan with a love for the people of Afghanistan, like to the point where I wanted to go back to spend time with them. I wanted to go back to see more of the country. I wanted to go back in a whole nother aspect, you know? And it started with little experiences like that, like just little innocent witnessing certain things like that just grew a testimony to me that everybody, there's just families all over the planet. Everybody grows up in a different set of circumstances. And when it comes to religion, you know, I found so many similarities and commonalities between the way I grew up, the way my beliefs were, the way my parents, like everything when it came to traditions and everything. There was a little bit of difference there, but there was a lot more commonality because I would have these lengthy conversations with a local Afghan man who, by the way, I helped get to America. He lives in Texas now with his family, and he's a security guard making $8 an hour, but he is so happy to be in the land of the free, But ultimately, like I grew to become friends with him over there, and it was through him and conversing with him that I came to let down and open my mind and let down all my guards and realize, uh, there is a purpose for the conventional army. There is a purpose for governments, intruding into each other's spaces and everything, like I actually helped educate a lot of the locals over there why we were even there. I actually made a point often, any local that would give me the time of day, I'd be like, do you know why we're here? And I would show them pictures of 9/11 and they would be mind blown. They had no concept, never heard of it. It was more like Romans occupying Israel back in the day. They just had no idea why we were there. They were more annoyed than anything that there were so many checkpoints and that they felt like us being there was more of a instigator for the Taliban doing what they do. And they would rather, I mean, most people that I interacted with locally, they were of the opinion like they just wanted it all to be over and they just wanted to get back to their normal life. And their normal life was very similar to all of our lives, where your main priorities is your family and putting bread on the table and, having some level of peace and happiness. That was something that I grew the biggest testimony of being on the other side of the planet with a whole nother group of people, a whole nother culture was everybody basically wants the same thing, and everybody from birth is just innocent. You know what I mean? And I could see this dramatic change from these 6 and 7 year olds to these 12 and 13-year-old boys, um, with their attitudes. Like the 14-year-old boys yelling up at me while I'm in the tower saying, F you, and they're using all these basic terms they get from soldiers over the years or whatever. And you can see that they shifted from innocent, not really understanding things to like being indoctrinated almost. And and by the adults surrounding them. And it's not a blanket one size fits all. I mean, there a lot of the people would grow up, let's say an orphan boy in Afghanistan most likely would become what's called a chai boy and be used. And then the only escape was to join the National Army. And so all these Afghan National Army guys, a lot of them were homosexual, and that was disturbing to me because I got hit on by several of them because I had blue eyes. They would come up and they would, try and make a move, and after that I wore my shades for the rest of deployment. I was not, but even that, I mean, it was an experience of realizing, well, oh man, like even more empathy for homosexuals, because I'm not saying that all homosexuals come from a background of being abused, but I'm just saying that it gave me some empathy for people in that state, whereas at one point it wasn't their choice, and
Hmm.
I was growing rapidly in a short amount of time when it came to perspective and all that. But
That's a
also,
lot.
yeah, and not only that, as far as the war goes, I made it a point to educate myself on why we were there, because I was asking myself that every day. Why am I here? And I thought I knew before I went. And then you'd ponder like, well, we've been here for 20 years. What's the problem? I was trying to solve that problem for myself. Just even, anybody who's thought about it, you try and come up with a conclusion, but I wanted the answer. And it's not a simple answer. It's actually a very complicated problem with a very complicated solution. And there actually isn't really any right answer, and it's not a simple answer. And ultimately, it just made me feel really small, really insignificant. And the fact that I wasn't doing what I projected myself to do over there got me to the point where I was like an all-time low. Like right in the middle of my deployment, I was like, what is the purpose of my life? Um, and it was pondering on some of those things I had witnessed and seen. And also, this is a whole nother aspect to it. My platoon started to become kind of alienated because we had a very special role on the base. We were the one platoon that was needing to be always ready. So we were always in our boots, always near the right next to the airfield, because we had to be able to get on a bird in 5 minutes flat at any time, just to go react to some mission that went bad or whatever. And whereas everybody else on the base who's just kind of living there, they're getting in their PTs and going to the gym, they're going to the chow hall, and we were just different on the base because we just had to constantly stay ready all the time, 24/7. And um anyways, there was this whole experience where nothing was happening for a while, but then all of a sudden one day the alarms went off. We got called in to go do something, and it wasn't off base, it was the base. They said the base was under attack. And so we all jumped in the trucks with very little information. We were given a direction, like it's the north side of the base. So we're rolling down inside the base, locked and loaded, ready to go. We show up to the fence, which the north side of the base was just some basic concrete, with like a 10-foot fence on top of the concrete. So you could see right through the fence. But we rolled up to the fence, and you could hear audibly that there was shots going off. Like you could hear the shots, but nothing. You couldn't see anything because the right outside the fence was really tall grass. It was like 8 foot tall grass field. And so all we knew at that moment was there's somebody in that field shooting at us. And there was like a little bit of a lull for the shots taking place. So we used that time to get in place and get in a better positioning. So we spread everybody out. We sent some guys up to the towers. We kicked the Somalian pirates out of the towers, and we took over that little area to make sure, this was locked down. We were doing our job. But because of that lull, everybody was in a wonderful tactical position for when the shots began again. Every single person opened up. Like everybody was firing at basically one little point. And here's the crazy thing about warfare in the 21st century, almost everything near an airfield is under um, observation. Like we have these giant
Mhm.
blimps, basically, like these big balloons up in the sky with millions of dollars of equipment underneath them, and one of those is a camera. And so they literally are watching from a command center, um, this whole platoon open up at once at one point, and it was a 10-year-old kid. It was a 10-year-old boy who, and this is my best judgment of what I gathered, but it was a 10-year-old boy who the Taliban decided to basically conduct recon by fire, send somebody at the base, see how we would respond, amp him up on some opium right before so he has
Mhm.
that liquid courage effect, and then hand him a pistol. All he had was a little handgun, and he just sent, and most people don't understand that the family is threatened to the death, right? Like you're going to do this or we're going to kill you all, or we're going to do this or we're going to kill your parents or whatever. And then, to make sure it gets accomplished, they'll pump them full of opium right beforehand, tell them where to walk. And then once you get there, just start pulling the trigger. So when it comes down to it, should any of us had fired without identifying the target? Even if we had identified the target, we were within rules of engagement to engage with somebody shooting at us, which he was. But most of us were doing what we had been trained to do, react to contact, which is you get shot at, you shoot back, and that's what we did. But except for because of that lull, everybody shot at once, and because we had that high energy of like, this is the action, we got to show up, it's game time. Everybody was like over the top when it came to like, if I had a machine gun, I'm not just going to do a 3 round burst. I'm going to do like, yeah, I'm going to hold the trigger for like 20 seconds, make sure, And so basically what happened after this event is the whole platoon was investigated for overkill, which means we would have all went to Leavenworth,
Mhm.
under the penalty of the military justice system. And um, thankfully, with enough of our signed sworn statements and the people who reviewed it, just let it go because they understood that, just like I explained it, like there was a reason why everything happened the way it did. Um, but after that, what I'm trying to say is that happened early on in the deployment. So like leading up to where I was like really depressed,
Yeah.
everybody started to treat our platoon really kind of awful. The commander started using us as slaves, basically. And I say that genuinely. Like we were
No, I know.
we were given some like, you know, Israelites in ancient Egypt type tasks. Like you guys are gonna be cutting trees down and bushes and burning them, and you're going, in 130 degrees, and you're going to be, mopping concrete on the airfield in 130 degrees and stuff like that. So I was like, we started getting these punishments, um, sort of. Anyways, what ultimately came down to is people started to exaggerate the story, kind of went through the grapevine to the point where the kid wasn't 10, he was 6, and then he was like 4, and then the whole platoon, we started getting called the child killers and all this stuff. And to me at the time, and I've processed and told this story so many times that I don't have a lot of emotion talking about it now, but because I've kind of processed that event fully, but at the time it was actually really affecting me. Like I was like, are we child killers? Like, why is everybody, because it seemed to me that everyone in my platoon was more excited that we had gotten into some action than they were sad that it was a 10-year-old and sad about the whole situation that the Taliban would even do something like that, not processing the whole picture. They were just like, oh yeah, we got our combat badges now and all this stuff. And I feel like that's what caused everybody to start.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, I'm sitting there like
Wow.
morally, I'm trying to process it. And I actually didn't pull any triggers because I was up in the machine gun on the 50 cal, which I knew that the rules of engagement at the time, you cannot engage with a 50 cal because
No.
it's so big with people.
Yeah,
It's like a
that's
vehicle and a building type situation. So,
just one shot
but
from that
yet,
would be considered overkill.
but yet, being that I was up in the turret, me and the other truck machine gunner, we were the only ones who were actually at risk of getting shot. And after the fact, the the bulletproof glass, the shield where our machine gun was mounted, and the antenna that was between us and the child were all shot up. Like they all had
So
been hit by the bullets, and we were the only ones who were actually, who would have actually had I guess, the right to return fire, but yet we couldn't, which was also a whole other thing me and the other gunner were really frustrated with. It's like, yes, I understand the rule, the why the rule was created, because I know what a 50 cal bullet will do to a human body, but at the same time, if we're dropping bombs on human bodies,
yeah.
if it's my life and I have to defend myself, this is the weapon that I have in my hands. That was a little frustrating. I mean, and if you've talked to combat veterans, they're all probably going to say the same. The frustration with the rules of engagement. Um,
Oh, yeah,
but
because logically, we all know why the rules of engagement exist.
right,
But when you're in that situation, you can see how it's not black and white. They look
yeah,
black and white on paper to anyone who's never been in boots on the ground with a gun. But once bullets start flying, those rules of engagement get pretty murky.
yep, absolutely. And so another aspect, so that happened, right? The witnessing of like the little girls type stuff that I guess I was more of the philosopher. Like everyone in my platoon, I was probably thinking the most about big picture and trying to process the events more and stuff. But there was another event where the CIA was doing their own operation utilizing the same airfield. And being that we were probably the most trained people that could work with the CIA, or in other words, the CIA needed some gunslingers to help them out. So we
Mhm.
were tasked for a small period of time to basically anytime the national police of Afghanistan or the Afghan National Army or the Afghan intelligence agency came across or had detained anybody thinking that they might be ISIS K or affiliated with ISIS K, they would they would first take them to the Afghan intelligence agency and they would hold them in cells and stuff, and they were treated like really badly, and I'll tell you about that. But they were like starved and beaten and all this stuff. But these guys would then be taken to the CIA on our airfield to be interviewed or interrogated or whatever, to so that we can decide as a nation, as well. And then, but this is how it looked. Okay, so we would go to the gate of the airfield. These black pickup trucks would roll up real fast. Um, Guys in black uniforms would get out, and then they would literally like kick these men out of the trucks. They'd kick them into like a pile of men. And the men are all wearing big black hoods over their heads. Their hands and ankles are handcuffed tightly. And every man in Afghanistan has like a beard. So the the mask actually doesn't cover, like it doesn't cover the beard. So like anyways, they would roll up, kick these guys out, and when you're there and you're looking in their faces and stuff, you can see the corruption. You can see that they're somewhat enjoying this. It's almost like this isn't that serious. We're already done with them. We've done what we want to do with them. Here you go. Um, and then they just peeled out. Like they kicked a big pile of men with black hoods in a pile, and they just peeled out in their trucks and left. And so then it's like this is something I had to process later, but at the time, we are thinking literally these are the enemy. These are the ISIS K guys. So I noticed something that I had only ever heard about and seen in movies, but all the guys in my platoon were at liberty to kind of treat these guys, within our rules. There's still a lot of gray area there. Like they're kind of being rough
Mm.
with them, getting them in line and making sure their masks were pulled down even tighter and all this stuff. And we had to walk them like a mile and a half to the CIA compound on the airfield, and we had to walk them because we didn't have any means of like those trucks. We didn't have means of like loading them up and taking them. We actually had to walk them. Now, remember, their ankles are handcuffed, and they're literally shuffling. And this is like the craziest experience I've ever had, but I had to assist the one guy that I was assigned to help. I had to assist that man that entire mile and a half. Like he could not walk on his own. That's how badly,
Messed up.
whatever,
Yeah.
whatever condition. And the whole time he kept trying to like, bring his hands up and like peel the hood up because with their beards and everything, like it was really hard to breathe as well. And it's 130 degrees, with a black hood on your head. But at the same time, even me, I was under the impression like I am handling the enemy right now. Yes, he has human dignity, um, but I'm not gonna do him any favors. You know what I mean? Whereas some of the guys in my platoon were like almost cruel to these guys to an extent. But anyways, we got them all to the CIA compound, and we kind of got them all sat down, and it was my job to take one at a time, get them up these stairs. There was only three stairs, but it was a struggle just to get them to get up the stairs into a room, and then I was to be the armed guard while the CIA guy interviewed them or interrogated them or whatever. And I witnessed every single one of those guys via like an American CIA agent, a translator, and then the guy. I was the one who brought them in, sat them down, took the hood off, and then stood at the door with my rifle. And I witnessed the entire conversation until I put the hood back on, took him out, got the next guy. And I did that for days. And these guys, not a single one of them, and I could just be naive, but not a single one of them was ISIS or affiliated with ISIS. Every one of them was just an unlucky farmer that the Afghan intelligence agency, which I believe to be really corrupt, just picked up at a checkpoint. For what purpose? I don't know if they just enjoy torturing people, starving them, not letting them drink water. Who knows? But man, I was like, wow, that is an eye-opening experience. Like we're talking like 30 men and not a single one of them, and they could have been lying through their teeth. But I mean, I was looking in their eyes, the tone in their voices. They seemed really in the dark, like they didn't know much. And they were only telling about the where they got picked up at this checkpoint, and then they were telling about the experience while they were imprisoned, basically, how they were treated and stuff. And I had a lot of empathy for these guys. Holy crap. These poor guys, if they're telling the truth, they just randomly got picked up at a checkpoint and their life turned into a hell. So about halfway through this group of guys, I start like having a little change of thought about these guys, and I start kind of getting the other soldiers that were with me in line. I was like, hey, give them water, like I was trying to change
Yeah.
their mindset, but none of them were experiencing it. I was the only one going in and hearing
Yeah.
their testimony, you know what I mean, their experience. So I didn't have a lot of empathy from my platoon. I was literally the only guy in my entire platoon who was tasked to actually be in the room. And I just couldn't, they all thought I was an idiot. They all thought I was being
Soft-hearted.
too empathetic and they just would rather see them all as the enemy and treat them that way. So for poor guys, but um so I started even within my platoon started to feel a little more alienated, right? So this is just a really low point. Anyways, I had this moment where it was just the middle of the night. We were still in uniform because we never got out of uniform. We always had our boots on and stuff. Just went out under the moon and the stars, and with everything I was trying to process, I just wanted to know if God was also processing this and if he was even there or if he was real. Because you know, there was a lot I was trying to process. And anyways, I basically just asked, looking up at heaven, looking up at the moon, I felt like there has to be a God and he's got to be able to hear me. But what I said was like Heavenly Father, are you really there? That's all I said. And then I just got from feeling so much turmoil, basically just immediately gone to a point where it was basically just a big warm blanket of comfort, acknowledgement, all this stuff with no words. It was a very real thing that happened to me. And from that point forward, I guess I didn't take so much upon myself to process. It was just like, okay, there is a higher power. For some reason, a lot of this is just part of whatever experience needs to happen down here. And he allows us, all of us on this planet, to use our own agency to make choices. And some of that's going to have consequences for other people on the planet. Like that little girl with her hands burnt. It's like, well, those parents had the choice to do that. They made that choice. And at that point is where, and there's like a saying, like, you can't be an atheist in a foxhole or something. But it was just for me, that's when I actually gained a personal experience with God. And I gained not only that, an understanding that with Jesus Christ, the whole idea of Jesus Christ is that he overcame this world. And it was the first time in my life where I really tried to process that and I put a lot of trust in it. So I put more trust in that Jesus Christ had actually won the battle over injustices that were taking place. And as I put more trust in that, I became more and more relieved. Like I had put it all on my own shoulders for some reason. But as I realized it wasn't my shoulders, like, the Lord says, vengeance is mine. I was like, I don't need to be the punisher. I don't need to be the guy who deals out the justice. Yeah, I might actually be that guy when I pull the trigger, but I was just trying to process and think through everything and be the person to serve in the highest capacity I could, and ultimately putting trust that Christ truly did overcome the world, not only, I mean, specifically the injustices like that he suffered, paid like whatever cost is associated for justice, and then he's full of the mercy and the ability. And it became real. I mean, I became a believer in Jesus Christ. Absolutely. And not only that, I looked up to him as the strongest, most capable captain, just a true leader, selfless leader. And that was the middle of my deployment. So after that, my whole deployment looked so much different. I mean, I had to process those events I was telling you about, and I did, but I started looking at life like an opportunity. I started seeing everyone around me as like this child of God that I could learn from, that I could experience life with. It was like I had a zest for life, and it's to this day, from that moment, I just have a zest for life. Like I want to get to know you. I want to know your story, just like you're doing right now. Like it's a source of fulfillment. I mean, everyone in my platoon was so negative, but from that point forward, I had a rich experience. Like I was going and getting to know, like while most guys were going to the USO to get fried Oreos, I was going to the contractors space where it's just full of a bunch of people from all different countries, and I was getting to know them. I was playing pool with them. I was taking a notebook and I was making business plans with them, and I was asking them about their family. And then any chance I got to be with the Afghan National Army guys, it was a complete turnaround. I mean, I had a whole platoon around me one time, actually many times. where the only guy who spoke English was the lieutenant. So he was the platoon leader or whatever. The only guy who could speak English was him, and every one of those guys wanted to talk to me, but he was the only translator and he was selfish. So I was like, I had to be telling the lieutenant, like, hey, what is that guy saying? And though he would translate, and then I would respond to him. I was like, yeah, tell him what I said. So I was trying to go through the lieutenant, but I would learn about their families. I would ask them, why did you join? Why did you join the army? Are you guys actually fighting the Taliban? And then I would kind of build like a rapport with them. Like, I want to go with you guys. Can I come with you guys and we'll go kill some Taliban in the mountains or whatever? And at one point I was like, hey, you look like a wrestler. You want to wrestle me? And when the translator actually said what I said, his whole demeanor changed, and he was like, he looked at me like, oh, he was ready to fight me, and it was just every day was like that. And it really came down to I was asking why so much. I was asking, well, I was genuinely wanting to make a difference. And I thought so long that the best way I could make a difference was to be the warfighter. But being a warfighter that was limited to even being able to fight the war, um, it was challenging me to change and to see things even bigger picture and deeper. And I realized something that I carry with me to this day, that there is a solution, that even big army doesn't see, that even the governments don't see, and probably couldn't even administer or help. And that, just like you were mentioning that story in the Book of Mormon, the power of word is more powerful than the sword. And that's something I truly believe, because as I started talking with these local, I became really good friends with a local. I became really good friends with an Afghan army guy. I became really good friends with an Indian over there. I became really good friends with a guy from Nepal. I just talked to him yesterday. That was, 6 years later. But ultimately, I realized that we're all children of God, and that there's a solution to all the world's problems. And it really comes down to um, that belief. If everyone truly believed that we were all children of God, born innocent, that would change everything. Not only that, if everyone believed that all the injustices were already overcome by an individual, right, Jesus Christ, then we could give vengeance to the Lord, and we could focus more on working it out and forgiving each other, and cooperating, collaborating, and everything, instead of trying to administer justice. Or right, 9/11 was basically a reaction to an injustice. Right, we invaded Afghanistan in response to an attack, and it was the best course of action we could come up with at the time. Um, but I'm sitting over there, I'm seeing, I'm looking out across over the fence line, out of the airfield, and I'm seeing this smoke, because a lot of people still use fires over there to cook and to heat and stuff. I'm seeing like a smoke over the whole valley, and I just feel this oppression, because another aspect of being in Afghanistan is the call to prayer over the loudspeakers, and every street corner, basically the whole valley reverberates with the call to prayer over the speakers. Everything stops, everybody does their prayer. um and when you're there constantly every day for months, it starts to kind of feel like you have like almost this feeling when it comes to um their call to prayer and everything, and you realize that this is so often, so frequent, and so tied to what's going on here. I started to see it like oppression. Yes, I think we have a lot of similarities with Islam, but Islam means to submit,
Mhm.
and I started getting my own personal opinion and stuff with when it comes to the religion and everything. I just looked out there and I was just, this place is oppressed, and the special forces motto is to free the oppressed. And I was like, how would you do that? We've been trying for 20 years to help her. We've had lots of different changes of mindset about the mission there. Like at one point we were like, hearts and minds, we got to win hearts and minds and stuff. But either way, I knew that a real solution for the country, and not just the country, but the entire world, was if was the belief that everyone was a child of God, and that there was a purpose to this life, basically, and that I feel like could have been accomplished by preaching the gospel. So I almost wanted to ditch my uniform and just go out there, learn their language and embed myself and do what I could, but I knew I'd probably get crucified or dragged through the streets. So I kept my head. But ultimately, I came back from Afghanistan a missionary. I was way more focused on, even just with the soldiers around me, I was way more focused on, because I had problems with the soldiers around me. They were very, they were kind of cruel, like I told you, and they were more focused on the action than they were the situation. Like it is unfortunate to shoot a 10-year-old boy. Like, why is that even happening? I had problems with my members of my platoon, but as I had more and more trust in that principle and that belief, I believed it more and more myself. The soldiers around me were just like those oppressed people in Afghanistan. I just started trying to do my part there and trying to just share more positive messages. Like I started having this mantra of, happiness is not determined by our circumstances, because everyone was so negative. I started to preach that mantra, and it was making a difference. People would ask me, I've had soldiers ask me, do you really believe that we're all children of God? Like everyone on this planet is and I was like, yes, I do. They're like, I've never met anyone who really believes that. That is so cool, And it's something we all need to believe. But anyways, so that's kind of wrapping up that thought. Um,
I just want to give a thanks to Brooks again for sharing his very intense and in-depth experiences in regards to his time in Afghanistan. It is not easy sometimes to face the reality of these conflicts and the experiences that our military veterans have to deal with. And it can be difficult for them to process those encounters and circumstances while in the moment, but especially after the fact. And so, not only being able to hear and appreciate the difficult things he went through, but how he then worked to overcome and process and work through that is advantageous as well. So, thank you so much, Brooks, for being willing to open up and honestly explain what you experienced. I'm really grateful for your support and the trust that I receive from not only you, but all of the veterans who allow me to be a part of sharing their story through this channel and other ventures as well. So, thank you. And if you are a veteran or know a veteran, if you work with the military community or have experiences that can help assist the military community, please let me know. Military spouses as well. I love to hear your stories. Gold Star families, I'd love to hear from you as well. This is a platform and an opportunity for us to build and strengthen each other and share what we've been through and help each other through the hard times as well as the good times. So, with all of that, I just want to please encourage you to like, share, subscribe, click it. Every bit of engagement and support that I get helps increase the amount of distribution we get from the algorithms so that these stories can be shared and uplift and encourage even more people. And I can't do that without you and your support. So thank you for everything you do as listeners and supporters of this podcast. Let's also remember to be the good that we want to see in the world. And as always, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you've been listening to Life of a Military Wife.
Spouses and veterans, hearts that won't quit, telling the truth about all of it. This life we live is hard and real, giving a voice to the lives that we live. story deserves its song.